Now to election 2014, less than 2 weeks to go. Some races are beginning to stretch out a little bit. The latest poll puts the governor up 8 points, 47 to 39%. The attorney general is up 10%. Secretary of State up 9 points. Plus, the 11th congressional district, Congressman Kerry Bentevolio following through on that write-in campaign. So we have a couple of things to talk about as we're in these last few weeks here. Again, the governor's race, we saw that stretch. Why is that significant for you, Stephen?
Well, I think that it's the commitment of independent voters, at least in our poll, that we saw more independent voters sort of moving toward Rick Snyder than toward Mark Schauer. Our poll was an outlier, though. I mean, there were several other polls this week that showed the race closer. I'm not sure what explains the difference. I think all of these polls, though, you got to look at over time what the trend is, and certainly the trend in our poll has been that the governor's pulling away from Schauer. I think the most notable thing is that this is the first poll since the town hall, and you didn't see a Schauer bounce out of that, and that was, I think, what his hope had to be.
But you know, somebody's seeing something, because I heard this morning that the Democratic Governors Association is pouring $2 million into that campaign for the final weeks. If they thought it was stretching out,
they might pull back a little bit,
because there's too many races across the country where that money's needed. So, you know, maybe they're believing those other polls we've seen. You know, there are flaws in all of those.
It's very difficult. It's a very difficult thing to do, is to predict how people are going to behave on election day. But again, it's the trends across time. You look at the same poll and how it moves each time you take it, as opposed to trying to compare one poll which has a certain kind of sample and methodology to another poll which may be doing it.
So your poll, you were 6, now 8.
It's
so
now
it suggests a trend line. We're in the field. We'll be out with a poll later this week, and you know, it'll be interesting to see. We were at 8 last time. Be interesting to see how it tracks.
I think the interesting number I pulled out of the poll was looking at the number of independents, and that was a 20-point gap for the governor as opposed to Mark Schauer. So that was a very interesting look for me on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's who decides races in Michigan. That's how Snyder won last time, was by getting independents to think that he was better. I think if you're the Democrats this time, though, you're hoping that more of those sort of core Democratic voters who have shown up in 2008 and 2012 show up for this midterm election. And one indication of how close it might be is that the number of absentee ballots that have been requested, especially on the Democratic side, is up pretty significantly. If they can, and that suggests that those are those 2008, 2012 voters, perhaps, that you're reaching there. If you get enough of them to the polls, if you get enough of them to cast a ballot, Mark Schauer has a real chance of winning.
But Republicans claim they're matching that absentee ballot drive. This is a base election. You've got to get the independents for sure. But if you get the independents and don't get your base out, you're still in trouble.
Yeah.
And that's why you're seeing all these people come in. Bill Clinton and Jeb Bush and President Obama, they're not coming in here to rally independent voters. They're coming in here to make sure Democratic voters, Republican voters get up on that Tuesday morning and say, I'm going to vote. And you know, it's all about getting your people out. That's why they're doing all of this early voting drives, and why they've got so many voter contact efforts underway.
I think what's also interesting when you look at these polling numbers, and what is always fascinating to me about Michigan and Michigan politics, is you have this top of the ticket here which skews so Republican. If you look at the polls, with the governor leading, and also with the Attorney General Bill Schuette leading, Secretary of State Ruth Johnson leading, and then you've got this statewide Senate race where you've got the numbers flipped, and Gary Peters has an 11-point lead over Terry Lynn Land, and yet you have a congressional delegation that is skewing more Democratic. I think it's always fascinating to look that in Michigan we're kind of a little bit of toss-up here.
This is a weird state in some ways, in the sense of that split. You know, top of the ticket, Michigan has not voted, for instance, for a Republican candidate for president since, I think, 1988, but has had, Republican governors, 2 of them since that time. As you point out, the congressional delegation is largely Republican, but that's about gerrymandering. There are more Democratic votes cast for Congress than there are Republicans, but the way the map is drawn, the Republicans get the majority of the seats. Michigan has also not sent a Republican to the Senate since, 98?
Well, Spence Abraham.
Spence Abraham
I
was
mean,
the
in
last
federal
one.
elections, the state tends to vote Democrat. I mean, and there are more registered Democrats in the state, but when it comes to picking statewide officers, they have, over the last 20 years, put far more Republicans in place than they have Democrats.
It's an interesting look. All right.